What if every human being could see the exact moment of their death, not as a date or time, but as a vivid, inescapable vision that played on loop in their mind from the moment they turned 18? The first thing you'd notice about the world is the silence. Not the absence of sound, but the weight of it, pressing down on every conversation, every glance, every breath. People walked with their heads slightly tilted, as though listening to a distant hum only they could hear. Their eyes, often glazed, flickered with the faintest shimmer of light, a reflection of the vision they carried. Some called it the glimmer, others, the shadow. But no matter the name, it was the same for everyone. A looped scene, a moment frozen in time, playing endlessly behind their eyelids. Mara was no exception. On the morning of her 18th birthday, she woke to the sound of her own heartbeat, loud and erratic, as though her body knew what was coming before her mind did. She sat up in bed, her fingers clutching the sheets, and waited. It didn't take long. The vision came like a wave, crashing over her, pulling her under. She was standing on a bridge, the wind whipping her hair into her face. Below her, a river churned, dark and endless. Her hands gripped the railing, her knuckles white. She could feel the cold metal beneath her palms, the sting of the wind on her cheeks. And then, without warning, she let go. The vision ended abruptly, leaving her gasping for air. She blinked, her room coming back into focus, but the image lingered, burned into her mind like a brand. She knew, without a doubt, that this was how she would die. At first, she tried to ignore it. She went about her days as usual, attending classes, meeting friends, laughing at jokes she didn't really hear. But the vision was always there, lurking in the corners of her mind, waiting for her to close her eyes. It wasn't long before she started avoiding bridges altogether. "You can't live like this," her best friend, Leo, said one evening as they sat on the roof of her apartment building. The city lights spread out before them like a constellation. He was 2 years older, his own vision already a familiar companion. His was quieter, less dramatic. A hospital room, the beep of a monitor, his hand in someone else's. He never said whose. "I'm not living," Mara replied, her voice hollow. "I'm just waiting." Leo sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You think I don't get it? We all do. But you can't let it control you. The vision isn't your life. It's just the end of it." "Easy for you to say," she muttered. "Your death isn't staring you in the face every time you cross the street." "No," he said softly, "but it's there, all the same. And I've made my peace with it." Mara wanted to argue, to tell him he didn't understand, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she leaned her head against his shoulder and stared up at the stars, wondering if they carried visions of their own. As the weeks turned into months, Mara found herself drawn to the bridge from her vision. It was an old, crumbling structure on the outskirts of the city, long abandoned and overgrown with ivy. She told herself she was just curious, that she wanted to see it in person, to prove to herself that it was real. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. She needed to face it. The first time she visited, she couldn't bring herself to step onto it. She stood at the edge, her heart pounding, her vision flashing before her eyes. The second time, she made it halfway across before turning back, her legs trembling beneath her. But the third time, she reached the center. The wind was just as she remembered it, cold and biting, tugging at her clothes and hair. The river below roared, its dark waters swirling like a living thing. She gripped the railing, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. "You don't have to do this," a voice said behind her. She turned to see Leo standing there, his hands shoved into his pockets, his expression unreadable. "How did you know I'd be here?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the wind. "I didn't," he said, "but I figured it was only a matter of time." She looked away, her gaze falling to the water below. "I don't know why I'm here. I needed to see it, to feel it." Leo stepped closer, his presence a steady anchor in the chaos. "You're not going to jump, are you?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy and unspoken. Mara shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. "I don't know." "No," Leo said firmly. "It's not inevitable. It's just a possibility. One of many. You have a choice, Mara. You always have a choice. She wanted to believe him, to cling to the hope that she could change her fate. But the vision was so vivid, so real. How could she escape something that felt so certain? As if reading her thoughts, Leo reached out and took her hand, his grip warm and reassuring. "Come on," he said. "Let's go home." She hesitated, her eyes flickering to the water one last time. Then, with a deep breath, she nodded and let him lead her away from the edge. The vision didn't disappear. It never would. But as they walked back to the city, the lights growing brighter with each step, Mara realized something. The vision wasn't her life. It was just a moment, a single thread in the tapestry of her existence. And while she couldn't change the end, she could choose how she lived until then. For the first time in months, she felt the weight lift from her shoulders. The silence was still there, but it no longer felt oppressive. It was just quiet. And in that quiet, she found a strange kind of peace.